Hello and welcome to Media Monitor on the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. Now this is where we take a look inside the world of media, analysing the trends, the issues and the reporting of some of the week's top stories. Thanks for joining us. I'm Peter Ndoro. This is what's coming up on the show today. EFF leader Julius Malema and a journalist, Karima Brown, went at it this past week, with Malema going as far as accusing the journalist for working for the Secret Service. We'll be taking a closer look at this strained relationship at times between politics and the media, not just here in South Africa, but across the continent as well. And we also take a look at magazines that have been suffering under the disruption of technology and social media platforms such as Facebook. And the question is, can anything be done? We'll be talking to a media mogul, Julia Raffaeli, shortly on that particular issue. But first, we start, as we always do, taking a look at what's on the front pages of your Sunday newspapers. And we start with the Sunday Times, and the top story there details how former Eskom boss Matsela Koko allegedly facilitated the looting of millions of rand, guaranteeing a multinational engineering company a 6.5 billion rand in future contracts if it subcontracted work to the Kusile power plant to Impulsive International. And this is a company part owned by Matsela Koko's stepdaughter. Now, as these details have been presented to the SIU by Swiss-based engineering company ICEA Brown Boveri ABB that scored a 2.2 billion rand contract with the power utility. The City Press is leading with a story that sees the State Security Agency going after Public Protector Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane. The SSA is under Minister Dipuo Letsatsi Duba has opened a criminal case against Mkhwebane, charging her with theft of information and violating South Africa's security laws after she allegedly got her hands on a classified document, this being an investigative report looking into media allegations of illegal operations by the SSA to destabilize SARS. The Sunday Independent is carrying a story suggesting that immigrants and their access to public services is set to be a key political issue in the coming elections. Gauteng Premier David Makhura is reported to have threatened to force Southern African countries to pay for their citizens' access to health services, as the burden on the province's resources has threatened to spiral out of control. The Sunday Tribune is reporting that electricity costs are likely to surge in KwaZulu-Natal as municipalities want a share of revenue over and above the 13.8% that Eskom was awarded by NERSA this past week. Eskom clients such as municipalities get charged the 13.8%, and then those municipalities, being the middleman, then add their charge on top of that increase to you and I as the ultimate consumer. The Weekend Argus in the Western Cape has got a story that says the State Security Agency, making headlines again, was misused by involving themselves in some spy activities directed at serving the interests relating to ANC factional politics. A 100-page report handed to President Ramaphosa suggests that the SSA was politicized from the highest office in the country down to managers when former President Jacob Zuma was leading the country, and perhaps even before that. The report talks of hundreds of millions of rands being abused in this way. All right, so that's the front pages, and we'll be taking a look at those again a little bit later on, as well as the other issues. But my guests this morning helping to make sense of these stories are Andrew Meldrum, Acting Africa Editor for Associated Press, and Shamano Mahadi, who's a journalist, a media and communications specialist, as well as a broadcast lecturer at the Tshwane University of Technology. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Peter.
Great, looking forward to chatting to you. Now, our first story, the print media in South Africa has been struggling for some time with the challenges brought on by technological disruptions and the emergence of a number of online platforms such as social media. Readership numbers and revenues have suffered, particularly as a result of the twin digital forces of Facebook and Google. We've even seen some publications shut down altogether. Now, one person who knows all about these trends all too well is the CEO of Associated Media Publishing, Julia Raffaeli. She joins me now on the line from Cape Town. Julia, oh my goodness, it seems that we don't quite have her on the line at the moment, and we'll try and get hold of her and continue with that discussion. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk over here and I'm going to chat to my guests a little bit about this issue, because it's quite a big one, and then hopefully we can get Julia on the line as well. All right, gents, thanks very much for joining us. And what I was going to talk to Julia about is technology disruption and how it has seen some magazines disappear altogether. And I'm just wondering, as journalists, and you guys have been at it for quite a while now, how has technology changed the job for you? Let me start with you, Andrew, because you've got grey hair.
Okay. Well, I think that it's changed amazingly. In the past 20 years, it makes it for us in the foreign media being able to file. For instance, we can just send it by email with the internet. We can file immediately. But what you're talking about is social media, and that is, yes, it's a disruptor, but you have to adapt to it. I mean, for instance, Twitter has become a crucial reporting tool. Across Africa, there are many heads of state, top officials, important organizations. They no longer make press statements. They issue their statement on Twitter, and you find it, and it's like, oh, here's the president.
Sometimes it's not a great idea. They do it themselves.
Well, sometimes, but you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
You have to catch that and stay up to date with it. So it is, a very important reporting tool.
Shamana, you're a teacher as well, and I wonder, as you've lectured, has social media become an important part of what you teach?
Yes, definitely. It is an important part of what we teach, because today we not just talking about this particular field within journalism. You'd remember the days when people would just be trained or come into newsroom as specialists on this particular bit, or maybe they work for a print media or radio. But we're talking convergence. We're talking newsrooms today in television. You also have an online presence. Radio, the same thing. They will also have an online presence. So it is an important part of what we do today.
All right, so we're going to chat a little bit more in detail with you, gentlemen, but I want to start with Julia Raffaeli, who's the CEO of Associated Media Publishing, and she joins me on the line from Cape Town now. Julia, thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program. You've been sitting on this international board for a while now, the FIPP, and I just wonder, when we look at some of the issues that the print industry has suffered over the recent times, what have you been able to learn sitting on this board?
Thank you very much for having me this morning. I think sitting on an international board is like being exposed to global issues and experience of all the other board members. There's 38 people who represent different countries who sit on this board, and through engaging with them and also having the support when you're going through complete disruption and acting as a unified body is probably the major benefit. These people have had years and years of experience, and I think we ultimately all facing the same challenge: is how do we reinvent and reskin the publishing the publishing business into the future for our industry.
So how do you think South Africa might have benefited? Because you wrote an article recently and you said that had we had an industry body, particularly for magazines, your area of expertise and publishing, that you might have been able to position yourself for this disruption. What could an industry body have done here in South Africa?
Well, I think that there are many issues that if you actually unify, you can work to overcome. For example, in our industry, in the Audited Bureau of Circulation, which is the ABC, which measures the effectiveness of a brand's reach with its audience, that took quite a while to translate into a digital omni-channel landscape. So what I'm trying to say is, in the past, the magazine was measured by its reach in print and circulation alone. And now I think most of us are delivering content 365 days on 8 channels daily, as well as a printed product in the mix. And it took a while for the ABC board to actually start to measure proper audience reach across channels. But there are numerous industries, numerous issues. For example, we've been delivering products through e-commerce of our brand's ready-to-shop website. And it's very difficult to work with the post office because, there is a perception in South Africa you don't get your product on time. So even though we are allowing our consumers to shop through our brand platforms, whether that be in print or on social media platforms using a QR code, there's still a very small amount of people that do shop online. I think it's about 2%. And we, as an industry and as a magazine media brand, should be encouraging people to shop online. So, for example, the post office, which is a whole other conversation, I think has been a barrier to entry in this particular sphere. And I think as a body, we've got a lot of power and weight because magazine media own a very trusted relationship with their audience. They not only have editorial integrity, but they have the ability to curate beautiful products done at Shop the Look. And just talking about working together to bring down the cost of postage and to work properly with, a body like the post office to actually get e-commerce off the ground properly would have been something that could have been fundamental. I could carry on for the whole morning.
Yeah.
There are many issues.
All right, so let's chat a little bit about how you've managed as a business to navigate your way through this technological disruption. You've lost some titles along the way, and I just wonder if the future of the glossy magazine, will we continue to see them on the shelves in our newsstands? Or is it for old school people like me who are very tactile and want to hold a magazine and smell fresh pages and look at these pictures as we turn the pages? Or is that a thing of the past in the future?
Okay, 2 answers to your question.
Yeah.
One is this is exactly the reason why there should have been an industry body to change the conversation and dialogue around print is dead, which has been going on for 10 years and has also made it exceptionally difficult when you're talking to an advertiser or a partner or sponsor, because that's been the industry dialogue. And as a body, we haven't had a body to support a different kind of conversation. So our feeling is that print is not dead, but it's certainly going to become a smaller part of the channel mix. It already is. So if, as a brand, you haven't or you haven't reinvented yourself into a brand that engages with its audience in the different mediums, in different ways, and you don't package your content appropriately per medium, then you're not going to survive. But for us, what we're seeing is our brands that really start conversations and drive conversations that matter. For example, Cosmopolitan driving Rock the Vote. We can do it in a sexy way. We can do it in a way that's authentic to our audience, and actually that maybe would affect change and get more people in South Africa to vote. We've just done our first selfie cover, collaborating with YouTube and using the 3 top local influencers on YouTube to basically build not just the brand, but build YouTube, and also to build influencers. So that's a first in South Africa, a first ever selfie cover, a first selfie cover on Cosmo worldwide. And I think that as a brand, you have to be able to remain in the spotlight. And to do that, you need exceptional content. And I think what happened was there were a lot of magazines on our shelves. And not only did the consumer change their behavior, which is the way of the world, they're bombarded with a lot more information and access to content. But brands have not, magazine media specifically, have not reinvented themselves quickly enough. So I think that the brands know that actually drive these conversations that matter will remain relevant and part of the consumer's brand experience. But ones that are just mainstream and boring and don't reinvent themselves, in terms of exceptional, relevant, sticky, engaging content won't have a place in the future.
All right. Perhaps as a final question, trying to look into that future, which is happening much quicker than ever before. What trends do you see? I think you've given us a clue already, but what trends do you see in 2019 and going beyond?
Well, I think that the trends are going to be, obviously video is big. Obviously influencers are big, and partnering and collaborating with influencers. I think that for us, it's also around, as I said, this utilizing our brand platforms, which we see as shop windows, to encourage relevance to our audience by allowing them to shop the product. But I think the trend will definitely be consolidation in the industry in terms of an underlying trend. So I think that there's got to be consolidation so that we work properly together towards a future. And then the other thing is diversification, which is the biggest trend, not only locally but also globally. So if you aren't operating in events, in affiliate revenue, and in other areas, alternative revenue, for example, delivering content to partners, perhaps not through only the magazine, but actually independently as well as, as a marketing creative solution for them, then I think you haven't diversified and you haven't looked at your IP and utilized the IP within our business over so many years, creating content for consumers, and which consumers have paid for through print, and utilize that IP to actually service your audience, which is readers, consumers, and marketers, much better in the future.
All right, Julia Raffaeli, thank you so much indeed for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us. That was the CEO of the Associate Media Publishing Company, Julia Raffaeli, with a stable of local and international magazines that they've been printing for some time now, talking to us about this new trends, introducing video and joining and partnering with other media platforms. That was Julia Raffaeli. Gentlemen, interesting developments taking place. It used to be you just pick up a magazine and it came out every month and you waited for the glossies. But what she's saying is that even that media is going to happen 365 days a year, and it's more than just print now. Have we seen the same kind of thing where a journalist used to be just a journalist, but now actually has to wear many hats on different media to tell the story?
Well, indeed. As I said, you have to be active in Twitter. You have to be active on Facebook. You have to monitor, but also you can't just rely on publishing your story in one media. You have to then promote it in several different ways. You have to be active and promote yourself on several platforms.
Facebook, friend or foe? Because on the revenue side, they say that look, monies that used to go to the to the newspapers directly and magazines is now going a lot of digital spenders on digital. But there's things that journalists can do that Facebook can't do. So do you use Facebook, or what do you do?
Well, I think platforms such as Facebook basically just help you to tell the story even better. Maybe before you can even publish it or put it on radio or television, maybe this is the platform where you get to communicate with your audience better. I mean, think of a television story where you have 1 minute 30 or 1:45. Maybe you don't have much time to sort of delve deeper into some of the issues. If you want to write about it, you can also put it on Facebook. But the other thing, Peter, which I'm also thinking about, in as much as this disruption, it's a good thing, or it has brought some positives. For example, news travels faster. I mean, whether you're talking about Twitter, you'd remember the story with Haiti 2010, how we got to learn about it through platforms such as the CNN via Twitter. So it has come at a price as well, because there are media ethics and the accuracy of stories which at times they are compromised.
Okay, final word about, and I'm looking to you because you've got experience across the continent. and we're at different layers of kind of progress, digitization. Some countries you still get 20, 30 different newspapers out there, and others, people are on their mobile phones. How's that been as a journalist to try and tell stories across a continent when we've got different layers of consumers?
Well, different layers and different mediums that people consume the news, but often, let's say in Nigeria, where there are a plethora of there's a very lively press coverage, there are lots of newspapers there, but there are also a lot of people who read those newspapers are also available on digital format, and so people are often reading things on their phones, they're actioning that through Facebook or for other places as well. And an important issue that has come up, a danger, is the spread of fake news. So in Nigeria, again, as an example, there are people who put up saying, look at what is happening in Rivers State, and they're putting up photos of people being killed that didn't happen in Rivers State at all, and it's they're old photos from somewhere, and it riles up people, and sometimes it has caused, these fake news reports have caused violence, there'll be violent reactions against that. And so that's something that has had to happen, is that there are monitors who say this is, who have to do fact checking and say, no, this is not real news. So that's an important, that's a danger that we see.
So everything has its pluses and minuses. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to take a look at something that's quite close to my heart, and that's the safety of journalists. And one story in South Africa has really kicked off that debate yet again. Stay with us for that.
We often take the important things in life for granted, like clean, fresh water running from our taps, a secure and clean environment for our children to play, easy access to transport, schools, shopping malls, and places of worship. In life, it is sometimes the smallest things that matter. Hence we say, where we live is where we leisure and learn. Where we stay is where we play and pray. With major investments on integrated housing projects that will deal with the spatial divide of our past, the promise of a better future cannot be underestimated. The Department of Human Settlements, changing people's lives.
Right, welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor. Now we turn our attention now to journalists and their safety on the continent. This was brought sharply into focus this past week when a war of words erupted between broadcaster and veteran journalist Karima Brown and the Commander-in-Chief of the Economic Freedom Fighters, Julius Malema. It all kicked off when Brown apparently posted an editorial instruction intended for her news colleagues in the wrong WhatsApp group. So her note landed on the EFF Media Statements group instead. The EFF leader was angered by her request that one of his party's events be monitored, and he then posted her message on his Twitter account saying that Karima Brown is sending moles to our breakfast with the elders. Because the screenshot Malema used on his tweet showed Brown's cell phone number, she then received a mountain of messages and threats, including that of rape and torture. Well, Malema deleted his tweet and subsequently distanced himself from the extreme messages that were sent. Malema spoke to the media this week on the matter.
She's not bound by any journalist ethics code. It's like me asking any ordinary person on the street, why do you do this? They will tell me where to get off. I've got no jurisdiction over them. They are individuals. If she was a journalist, I will take it up with her. I've taken up issues with all of you, including this one from ENCA. I call him and tell him, yeah, you are wrong. And I've never exposed his number. But I've got no jurisdiction over her. She was in the group because she was a journalist at some point. She has lost that privilege. an avatar on an Instagram or WhatsApp or Facebook doesn't make you a member, especially in the era of fake news, where people say all types of things hiding behind the social media. So there is no member of the EFF who has attacked West through the mandate of the EFF. There is no such an instruction issued from the EFF. No individual must be threatened of rape. Rape is a serious problem in South Africa. Anyone who has done that actually must be locked up and rot in jail for a very long time. Things like rape, things like violent crimes are not the things to go around playing with them. We've got a serious problem in South Africa of violence against women. We've got a serious problem of rape in South Africa. It's not something that you can threaten a person with. It doesn't matter how much you disagree with those people. We have not, but we're condemning it. We're saying either in our name or not, it's unacceptable. Even if it's done by EFF members, which I doubt, it's unacceptable. Karima is not a journalist.
But she's a media person.
No, but she's not a journalist.
But she has a show in NC.
No, but she's not a journalist. She's not an editor. She's not a journalist.
What is she?
I don't know. You tell me, because you're calling her media. She's not media. She's not governed by the bodies that govern journalists and editors. And therefore, those rules do not apply to her. She's not a journalist. She's just an individual who hosts the show. And therefore, she will be treated as such. There is no journalist, not one, that can claim we've got their numbers. We can claim that we've exposed their numbers because they said something we do not like. We exposed them because we didn't want to generalize about journalists. We must start isolating the rogue ones and expose them for who they are, that they are not journalists, they masquerade as such, and therefore they must be exposed. I think she's a state agent. I think she's an operative. I think she's intelligence. I say that. She's an intelligence, she's an operative.
Well, Karima Brown also had her say on the events of this past week, and she didn't mince her words, blaming the EFF leader directly for the attacks on her by what seems to be his party supporters. She's threatened legal action and wants action taken by the Independent Electoral Commission as well.
EFF is a threat to our democracy. I'm not going to negotiate with the EFF if I can do my job as a journalist. I'm not going to seek their permission, and I'm not going to ask them for the right to do my work. What I do at ENCA is of absolute no concern to them. My producer's notes to my producers is what I've been doing for more than 20 years. It's what every single producer does. So Mr. Julius Malema supposedly outing me is complete nonsense and utter rubbish. I want to ask, what is a party that threatens journalists with rape, with sexual assault, with violence, with racism going on the ballot box? What is the IEC going to do about this? What is Parliament going to do about this? What are our institutions of law enforcement going to do about this? This is happening to me. This happened to Paulie van Wyk. This happened to Tandeka Kubule. This happened to William Boko. The list is endless. They continue to go on like this. We took the BLF to court. We managed to get a restraining order against them when they attacked Peter Bruce and assaulted me outside his house. The EFF needs to actually be held accountable by our society, by our democratic institutions. There needs to be an investigation into the systematic abuse of journalists by them. How can they be on the ballot box when they violate a fundamental principle of democracy, which is that we should have the right to have a free press and a free media?
All right, so gentlemen, she was threatened. She was had to deal with a barrage of hate speech and all sorts of threats of rape and torture. And I just wonder, and SANEF, which you're a part, took a very strong position on this matter. Take us through your concerns as the National Editors Forum and what this means, what lessons we can get from what's happened this past week.
I believe this could have been handled differently. Obviously, the EFF have concerns which they have raised, but I think at the center of it is the journalists' number that was published, and that I think is the one thing that created problems because a lot of messages started coming through from people that are believed to be EFF supporters. But if it was a case of a political party that is concerned, or maybe they do not understand what is believed to be a brief to the team, maybe a telephone call, maybe just trying to establish the facts. What is this about? But without even communicating and going to the extent of publishing the number, I think that's what brings all the problems that we have seen in the last couple of days. Yeah.
So Andrew, the CPJ, the international body looking at journalists, also concerned about this, and they issued a statement saying that, you know, this issuing of contact information of journalists is a very dangerous thing. And they talk about the IEC, and I wondered, has a breach of electoral conduct been breached here sufficiently to look at EFF and some kind of sanction?
Well, I think the Committee to Protect Journalists, which you've cited, is, you know, an important organization around the world, and they are very solid and responsible, and they look at things, you know, carefully. And I do think that, you know, to call in and to have the Electoral Commission look at the situation, not just in this case, but we're coming into the campaign period, and to, you know, to look at the situation for journalists overall. You know, open, free coverage of a campaign period is an important part of free and fair and democratic elections. I think one of the most worrying things, okay, the publishing of her number was one thing, but also to assert, as Julius Malema just did when we saw on the thing, that she's not a journalist. That, you know, he was saying, oh, respect journalists, we do all this, you know, and all that, but she's not a journalist, and therefore, you know,
it's fair game.
It suggests that it's fair game, and I think that's very dangerous. I mean, you could say to anybody, I'm not a journalist, you're not a journalist, and that to me is a very dangerous thing.
So, Shabano, the Commander-in-Chief of the EFF says it's not his supporters doing these threats. He has not instructed them, and he's condemned it. Is that enough?
Whether it's the supporters of EFF or not, but the bottom line is that a journalist's number was published, and that's what created problems. And I think if there's an admission on that part that we have made a mistake, then you are able to move with ease. Let us also remind ourselves, I mean, it was not so very long, probably about 4 weeks ago, the night before the EFF's manifesto's launch, where Julius Malema was saying, without the media, we are nothing, we are all for the media, and we support media tribunal and all of that. So you're seeing almost the same person sort of contradicting himself with what has been said and done within the last couple of days. So I think really it's just a matter of really understanding that there are certain things that needs to be handled in a particular way. Of course, media is important. We are going towards elections. It's a tightly contested election, and we've got to be really, really careful. And politicians themselves, especially at the position of leadership, there has to be some kind of understanding that we have to respect media, freedom of speech, press freedom. It's very important, and we cannot overemphasize on these issues.
All right, so there is a danger we can focus on South Africa, but this is a challenge that's being faced right across the continent now. And what I'd like us to do now is listen to the Ugandan President, Yoweri Museveni. Our senior foreign editor, Sophie Mkwena, had a chance to catch up with him not too long ago and pose these issues of media freedom in Uganda. And this is what he had to say.
Some people are not allowed to appear on certain media houses, especially those in the opposition. Currently, it's Bobby Wine. Media houses are under pressure not to host him in any platform.
The media freedom is too much. It needs to be more disciplined. It's too much. It is anarchic. It's anarchy. In South Africa, you don't misbehave so much. You're more self-regulating.
Last month, a video circulated on social media showing a photographer, James Agena, surrounded by Ugandan soldiers.
The opposition sometimes they misbehave, they try to intimidate people, then the police acts on them. That has been the issue which I heard them talking about outside, that the police had clashed with some people. It clashed with them because they were attacking other people.
So that was Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni speaking to our foreign editor, Sophie Mkwena. Andrew, you've worked across the continent, Zimbabwe in particular, and you've felt the hand of the state. Take us through these experiences, because what Museveni is saying there is typical of a lot of African leaders that always say that the media are to blame and that they've done nothing wrong.
Yeah, this is a real problem when often a politician or political parties that are wanting to stay in power, the journalist's job is to hold those in power accountable, to ask questions, to investigate, as we've seen, in the papers here. And that makes those who are in power accountable, particularly if they're trying to extend their stay in power. And so they turn and they attack and say, this is too much, we don't want that. But again, just as important freedom of the press is important for elections, it's also important for democracy, and particularly for leaders who have stayed in power for a long time, who have entrenched interests, who have policies that should be looked at. They may not want the spotlight of journalism on that. And so that's where the trouble comes in, and they try and make it as the journalists are troublemakers rather than fact finders.
And we're seeing countries use legislation to shut down the media, and try and say that you're part of some extremist group or that you're a threat to security. And I just wonder how, in fact, there's a story recently of people in Ethiopia, journalists who were trying to shoot something, did a story in the rural areas, and the police came, arrested them, and then locals, 10 young men, beat up these journalists. So there is that incitement. We don't know whether it's genuine anger or they're planted by the state.
I mean, it's both ways, Peter. I think politicians, if they understand the fact that what they say matters, because it has some kind of influence, and to a certain extent it can even influence communities to behave in a particular way. I mean, we have seen a lot of these cases where journalists will be going to our communities trying to do their work, and in return you have communities turning against journalists, which is really, really bad. So there has to be some kind of understanding. But just to pick up a point which he makes here, there has to be an understanding that press freedom, it plays an important role in the making of our democracy. And if we have that understanding, we will treat journalists the way they're supposed to be treated. When certain stories are reported, even when they don't favor them, there will be that kind of understanding.
All right, we're running out of time, but very briefly, in about 20 seconds if you can, what steps can journalists take to be safe, particularly in this period that we're getting into, where it's going to take a small amount of agitation and they're in danger?
There are several things that can be done. One is to work with the Committee to Protect Journalists, with Reporters Without Borders, or the SANEF here. And a lot of times it is our prominence that is the protection. so that if anything happens against a journalist, and then the world will know about it. And I think that's the most important thing.
All right, okay. We're going to have to take another break, and when we come back, we'll be taking a look at your newspapers, and we also travel to Sierra Leone and Freetown. Stay with us.
On the 7th of February, the season premiere of One Day Leader is coming to a TV screen near you. One Day Leader Season 7 is at 9 p.m. on SABC1 Mzansi for sure.
Judges, are you sure of your choices today?
One Day Leader, Thursdays at 9 p.m. on SABC1 Mzansi for sure.
On Trends Travel, we bring you a full guide on all things lifestyle related. With so much to discover, we give you comprehensive reviews of places to visit, music, travel, and food. We also explore the arts, whether on or off stage. All this and more, be sure to tune into Trends Travel, Saturdays at 5:30 p.m.
Welcome back. You're watching Media Monitor. It's time now for us to look at the newspapers. And we start with our new feature, and that's getting an international view of front pages from a country on the continent. And today we go to Freetown, the capital of Sierra Leone. And taking us through the headlines there is journalist and international correspondent Umaru Fofana. Umaru, thanks very much indeed for joining us. And very good morning to Freetown, Sierra Leone. Good to have you. What's on the front pages of your papers in your country today?
Hi, Peter. Well, basically, it has to do with the fact that the new government is just under 1 year in office. And one of the things the government has been pursuing here is what is known as the commissions of inquiry, trying to investigate some of those things that happened under the previous administration. So the front pages they are littered with stories on how those three commissions of inquiries are proceeding. There is one headed by a Ghanaian senior judge, another one headed by a Nigerian justice, and then one headed by a Sierra Leonean. So all the things that are going on there are being discussed. And also this week on the front pages here, we've had stories having to do with fires in Freetown. There has been some glitches, but the government has announced that a second Turkish power ship has come, and that has engendered a lot of discussion. Some people saying that we cannot have power ships being here supplying the capital city forever. It's about time that a more permanent structure was set up. But anyway, that second power ship is here, and it's providing Freetown with virtually non-stop electricity. We've also had a story about a fire incident just close to my residence here, actually. There is a slum nearby called the Krube. There was a fire incident that left hundreds of people displaced. And questions have been asked as to how the emergency services have managed to, or not managed to, be able to respond to that situation. So these are all the stories we've been having here. And also the fact that the government has commissioned some schools. One of the key projects of the new administration has to do with free education from primary to high school level. So 100 schools have been commissioned in a place in the north of the country, because one of the challenges that have beset this whole free education project is the fact that the classrooms are overcrowded simply because there are not enough classrooms and there are not enough teachers. So those schools have been approved in the south, I should say, in a place called Moyamba district. But the question has also been asked as to how many teachers are available for those schools to be properly run with the increased number of kids in the classrooms.
All right, so Umaru, you don't have weekend papers. How free is the newspapers and how frequent are they? Give us a sense of the state of print media in particular in Sierra Leone.
Print media is really badly challenged in Sierra Leone. And interestingly, I think it was in Sierra Leone is the second country after South Africa where an English language newspaper was published in sub-Saharan Africa. But the reality today is that that doesn't really reflect on the pages of the papers, in the sense that sales are really poor, advertising is poor. As a result, poverty, corruption, as well as the draconian media law that we have in this country are besetting the way journalists practice their trade here. It is still a criminal. Sierra Leone still has criminal defamation law under which truth is not a defense, which also allows for pre-trial detention. So it's a delicate balancing act for journalists here not to land themselves in trouble. So they are being cautious. But that has not really very much impacted the manner in which some people have decided to be practicing their trade. And the advent of social media has meant that citizen journalists are also really venting out whenever they feel hard on back, using either their Twitter handle or using Facebook, or most popular one being WhatsApp.
All right, Umaru, thanks so much indeed for joining us and giving us a sense of what's happening on the media front in Sierra Leone. That was international correspondent and local journalist Umaru Fofana in Freetown. All right, we come from West Africa. We come back here to South Africa. And the front pages of our newspapers are awash with quite a few drama. But before we go that, what I'd like to do is today one story that's not on the front pages, but because it's playing out right now, is that the fourth largest party in the House of Assembly is the IFP, and they are releasing their manifesto today. And our senior reporter Mzwai Mbeje is there for us. Mzwai, thanks very much for joining us. Give us a sense of occasion, the launch of this manifesto, what we are likely to hear, and are the party faithful there in their numbers?
Oh, well, a very good morning to you, Peter. Indeed, you can hear the music right now. It's already blaring, so the people have started arriving, and we are expecting about 20,000 people in terms of the expectations of the party. So when we spoke to some of the officials here earlier, Peter, they were telling us that they were going to gear a very clear roadmap for the country, basically saying this party, the IFP, is the party really to be trusted. They're saying it's got a track record of delivering services to the people. So we expect the leader of the party, Dr. Mangosuthu Buthelezi, to table that manifesto at around 1 or maybe at 1:30. And then from there, it will be the official launch of the manifesto of the IFP. Remember, this party has been struggling in terms of the votes. If you compare what they got, Peter, from 1994 up to today. Just to give you a quick update in that front. In 1994, so in the National Assembly, they got 43 members. Come to elections of the 2014, so they are having only 10 members of parliament. So you can see that the message really that they would want to sell to South Africans will be one that will seek to restore the confidence that people once had in this party. As you can hear now, so it's music, it's people filling up very, very nicely here. The grandstand behind me, it looks to be full, but of course there's still a wider area on the other side of the stadium that is not yet full. But of course, there's still a lot of time before the president of the IFP, Dr. Mangosuthu Buthelezi, speaks.
All right, Mzwai, we're going to have to leave it there. That's Mzwandile Mbeje, who's there in the KwaZulu-Natal for the launch of the IFP manifesto, and you can carry on watching the SABC News channel. We'll be carrying that live a little bit later on with updates in between. All right, let's come back. We're running out of time, so very quickly, what stories grabbed your attention in the papers, Shaman?
Briefly, the story that grabbed my attention, it's in one of the Sunday papers.
Which one is that?
That would be the
City Press.
Yeah, City Press. Babes Wodumo, I can't go back, he will kill me. But I really don't want to go much into details because much has been said about this. We celebrated Women International Day, just 2 days ago. So I think there's a lot of issues that are affecting women that I think they need to be highlighted. Yes, Babes Wodumo and the partner, they might be, famous, but there are a lot of people that are living in rural areas.
Pages.
Yeah, they don't make front pages, and these women are also suffering the same,
I share your
violence,
thoughts exactly.
yeah.
Andrew, very briefly, what story grabbed your attention? Which paper?
On the Sunday Times, Zuma's spooked Cyril campaign about spying within the ANC, and as we come into the elections, this is what happened last year, but there's every indication that there will be that kind of vying for power and influence within the ANC in the upcoming elections. I was also drawn to Coco's Eskom looting frenzy. We all have experienced Eskom's ups and downs in this past week. And we can see from this story and many others that there is, a level of
he has denied
mismanagement.
that he knew that his stepdaughter had a contract with Eskom. But now ABNB have stated categorically that part of them getting a contract was if he subcontracted to Impulse International, part owned by his daughter. So I'm sure that the state capture inquiry is going to hear quite a lot in this coming week.
Yeah, which was actually a very strange thing, Peter.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a daughter who had
In the
a
house.
whopping, as we were told by those reports, over R1 billion, and you still claim
No
that you
clue.
didn't know your own daughter was involved in this kind of deals.
Gentlemen, I wish we could chat for much longer. We've run out of time, but thanks so much indeed for your insights as always. You've been great guest editors. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Peter.
All right, and you at home, thanks so much indeed. That's a wrap for the show today. We'll join us again at the same time next week for more of the same. Have a great week, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.